Alrighty, so in this section we're continuing the same thing with factoring of trinomials, but the difference is this time a is not just 1. You can see here a is 5, so the coefficient of that first term with x squared is a 5. The only way this works differently is that we take that first, that 5, and c, right? So in this case 5 and 2, so we take a and c, multiply them to get 10. And then we take a look at factors of that 10 that produce 11. And as we can see over here, like we did in the last section, we can try 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. Well, 2 and 5 added together is 7. That doesn't help us out. But 1 and 10 added together is 11. So what that means is that, now I know last time we started with x and x in the front. Not the case though. We're going to have to multiply 1 and 10 to get, or add rather to get to that 11. And we get that by some more multiplication. So here's what I really mean to say. So we have we're going to take and multiply 5 and 1. In other words, 5x and 1x. That's going to yield our 5x squared at the beginning. Then we have to go back and take a look. Okay, well, I know for sure I'm going to use, I'm going to create 11 from 1 and 10. Well, how am I going to get that 1 and 10? Well, I know that I can take factors then of 2, right, to multiply with the factors of 5 to get my 10. In other words, 5 times the 2 is 10. And 1 times the 1 is the 1. That's how I'm going to yield my 5 times, I'm going to yield 5 times 2 to get 10, and 1 times 1 to get 1. Add them together to get the 11. So what that looks like then is if we go back and check it, we multiply it out, so we get 5x squared plus 1x plus 10x, right, there's my 11, plus 2 in the end. Combine like terms, so we're going to get 5x squared plus 11x plus 2. So obviously the way we factored it was correct. And again, where did we get all those factors from? Well, I know for sure the 5 is only going to break into 5 and 1. And I'm trying to create an 11 in the middle. Well, I know that 5 times 2 is 10, so the factors of 10 I use are 1 and 10 to create the 11. Then I have to mix them around until I get it right. Right? You might have accidentally written 5x plus 2 and 5x, or rather x, not 5x, but x, there we go, and x plus 1. And you multiply that out, you'd find out you're going to sure get 5x squared plus 2x plus 5x, right, plus 2. The middle is only going to give us 7, not 11. That's how you know that this one didn't work. So we're going to have a lot of practice with this. Okay, so on this one, what is the factored form of 6x squared plus 13x plus 5? So before you do anything, take a look at these terms here. So I'm going to write this out for 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. And I know that I'm going to take 5 and 6 to create 30. So 6 times 5 makes 30. And I have to find factors of 30 then that when added, because these are all plus signs, that when added create 13. So I can start listing those out. I can say 30 and 1. That's not going to be useful. That creates 31. 15 and 2. That sounds promising, except that these are all positives. So 15 times 2, or 15 plus 2 rather, is 17, so not useful. 6 and 5. So 6 plus 5, no, that's not going to do it. And then how about 10 and 3? And if I add those, I do indeed get 13. So my goal then is to create a 10 and a 3 that are going to add together to get that middle term of 13x. So what that means, I have to start playing around with the numbers here. So now again, I'm going to create a 10 and a 3 from the factors of 6 and 5. So if I take a look at the factors of 6 and 1, right, and 2 times 3, and I look at these factors of 5, well, I'm going to have 1 and 5. That's pretty much all I'm going to get. So I got to figure out how we're going to create a 10 and a 3 from this. Well, if I take a look here, the 6 and 1 is not going to be useful with the 1 and 5, because 6 times 1 is 6, 5 times 6 is 30, not going to get there. But you might notice that this 5 and this 2 when multiplied create 10, and this 3 and this 1, when multiplied, make 3. Add them together, I get my 13. Now is where you got to start asking yourself, okay, so I'm going to place these in parentheses, right? I know for sure I'm going to have 2x and a 3x, and I want to be able to create, again, a 10 and a 3. Well, 2x times 5, right? And the outer terms multiply each other, and 2x, or 3x rather, times 1, and that's your inner terms. So how does that go when you go ahead and factor it out, or multiply it out to check it? Well, you get 2x times 3x is 6x squared. Inner terms, 1 times 3x is 3x. Outer terms, 5 times 2x is 10x. In the last terms, 1 times 5 is 5. So we get 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. And that's going to, so obviously it worked. This was the right combination. Now, you might have messed up along the way. You might have made some mistakes. And just a second here, I'll go through what that looks like. One of the common errors I see are people going, okay, well, I know for sure I need a 2 and a 3 and a 5 and a 1. Again, notice the 2 and the 3, right, and the 5 and the 1. So they might end up going by accident 2x plus 5 and 3x plus 1, thinking they're going to get there. But you have to think about those middle terms the whole time. 5 times 3 is 15. 2 times 1 is 2. But the problem is that's going to create 15 plus 2, giving me 17x in the middle. So you've really got to watch how we're going to get there. Now, if there was subtraction involved, that might work. That might get us to the 13 if that were a negative 13. But in this case, it's not going to do the job. So you might be with some trial and error involved here until you really get this figured out. So again, the way I did that, I looked at my factors of the front one, 6 and 1, 2 and 3, and factors of the back number. Well, luckily there's only 5 times 1 here, right? And I need a combination that's going to create 10 and 3. And how did I know I needed 10 and 3? Because again, I knew that my front term 6 times my last term 5, so A times C is 30, and I need to take factors of 30 to create 13. I know it's a lot of steps, but that's why we're going to keep doing this. And again, I took a look here and I knew 5 times 2 is 10, 3 times 1 is 3, 10 plus 3 is 13, so I knew that this combination here would work. Okay, so when that A times C, right, so 3 times 15 here is negative, things get a little more complicated. So I look at negative, or factors of negative 45. And I got to take a look at their sums here. So find factors of AC, so that's 3 times negative 15, that have the sum of B, so 4. So since A times C is negative 45 and B is 4, again, find factors of negative 45 that have a sum of 4. So you go along here until we find it. No, notice positive 4, not negative 4. So 1 and negative 45. All these are mostly useless to get clear down here to 5 times negative 9, or negative 5 times 9. And you can list those out. Then I have to go back and realize, okay, I need to create a negative 5 and a 9 using a 3, right, and a 15. So factors of 3 and factors of 15. And what that means is 3 times 1, that's a factors of 3. And negative 5 times 3 is our, so that's our negative 15. So again, we end up with the negative 5 times 1 here, so that's my negative 5, and 3 times 3, which is my 9 up here. So that's where that comes from. And yeah, there's going to be some trial and error in this. I'll tell you right now, this will be one of the toughest topics you come across, especially if you struggle with number sense. Okay, so as we start here, what is a factor form? 10x squared plus 31x minus 14. So what I realize is I've got that A times C, so I've got 10 times negative 14 is negative 140. So I'm going to need factors of negative 140 that create positive 31. And you can go through a whole list of things to figure that out. You can try 140 and 1, right? That's not going to be helpful. 2 and 70, not going to be helpful. You'll end up finding that you need 30 to create a 35 and create a negative 4. Because when I add those together, I get that positive 31. So that means I'm going to take my factors of 10 and my factors of 14, and I'm going to try to create a 35 and a negative 4. So 10, I have 10 and 1 and 5 and 2. And 14, I have 14 and 1 and 2 and 2. So, again, I'm trying to create a 35 and a negative 4. Well, maybe we recognize here, I'm sorry, 2 and 7. That's what I'm trying to, I don't know why I wrote 2 and 2 over there. So 2 and 7. So, we recognize hopefully that 5 times 7 is 35. There's my 35. And 2 times 2, and one of those is going to be negative obviously, is going to create my negative 4. So that means when I write this out, I need to make sure and I need to get that 5 to multiply by the 7. So what that'll look like is, so in order to create that 35, the 5 and 7 have to be on the outside of each other, so or both on the inside, I guess, if you looked at it that way. But so I'm going to say I need 5x, right, and a 7. There's my 35. And I know that I want to create negative 4, so I'm going to have 2x and then minus 2. That's where I get all the numbers from. So again, I want to create that 35, and I want to create the negative 4. Again, that 35 and negative 4 in order to get that middle term of 31. So my factored form is 5x minus 2 and 2x plus 7, and I do expect that you FOIL that back out to prove that it does indeed create this trinomial 10x squared plus 31x minus 14, so you know you have the right answer. And so you don't mix these around like we talked about in the last problem. Some folks do that. You might get 2x minus 2, right, and 5x plus 7. But if you multiply that out, you find that it doesn't actually work. So here again we see theoretically an application problem, right? So this is my area of the rectangle. In other words, just factor this thing, right? And you find that you have 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. So I'm going to take factors of 2. Trying to create a negative 13 out of negative 14. So we find right away that 1 times negative 4, or 1 plus negative 14 is negative 13. So now my goal is to create negative 13 using factors of 2 and factors of 7. And so you might write those out. So again, our goal is to create a negative or positive 1 and a negative 14, right, from the factors of 2 and 7. Well, 2 and how many choices? I have 2 and 1. And 7, how many choices really? 1 and 7. And we recognize real quick that 2 times 7 is our 14. 1 times 1 is our 1. So we're going to have a negative attached here to the 7 in order to create that negative 14. And we can see here, again, what that looks like written out. But again, that's where we get the factors from each time, is that whole process, a times c, factors of that in order to create the middle term. And then we go back and we take a look at the factors of a and the factors of c that help us to create those two factors that made up the middle term c. Similar problem here to the last one. 8x squared plus 22x plus 15. So we start off right off the bat multiplying our a and c, so 8 times 15. So if you're not doing that and you're saying you don't know what to do, start there. Do something. So 8 times 15 is 120. So I need factors of 120 that are going to create 22. I think I figured that out pretty quick. 10 times 12 is 22. So again, our first part, the first thing we do, multiply AC. Second thing we do, find factors of AC that create the middle term. Now we go back and look at AC, find factors of A and C. They're going to create these two terms, 10 and 12 now. So I know it's quite a bit here, but that's the expectation. So we're going to take 8, and we need factors of 8. Well, I've got 8 and 1, 2 and 4, and factors of C, which is 15, and I've got 1 and 15, and 5 and 3. Maybe we can recognize here that, again, we're shooting for 10 and 12. Well, 2 times 5 is our 10, and 4 times 3 is our 12. There's my 10 and my 12. So you need to make sure those multiply out to create that middle term. So we start like this, and we know for sure that the 8x is going to be made up of 4x and 2x. That's how where we get the 8x squared from. I didn't erase very nice. There we go. So again, and 2x. And we're trying to get that last term of 15. Now the trick is, where do the 5 and 3 go? Well, I know the 3 has to be multiplied by the 4. So in order to get that outer term there, right? So 4 times 3 is 12. 2 times 5 is our 10. That's where I get them from. And again, you'd FOIL this back out. You're going to have 8x squared plus 10x plus 12x plus 15. So 8x squared plus 22x plus 15. And there we go. So this set worked. And again, if you mixed them around and didn't get the right answer, move them back around again. Alrighty, so now like it hasn't been difficult enough, so we're going to make it a little more fun. Take a look at this one. 18x squared minus 33x plus 12. Maybe you noticed there is a 3, right? A factor of 3 in all of 18, 33, and 12. So ones like this, you do need to factor that 3 out first. Once you do that, we find that inside we end up with 6x squared minus 11x plus 4. Now we can go back to the method we've been using. So again, that 3 is going to go along for the ride. Notice the whole way as we're factoring down here. So we're going to have 6 times 4 is 24. Look for those factors of 24 that create negative 11. As we go through the list, we find that negative 3 and 8 create negative 11. So my goal is going to be to use 6 and 4 to create negative 3 and negative 8. And we're going to find as we do that, that 3 and 2, there it creates my, 4 times 2 rather creates the 8, and 3 times 1 creates the 3, and negative 4 times negative 2, right, that's so, and then 3 times negative 1 creates the negative 3, so that is the fully factored form there. So again, before I'm able to use my, my method of finding the factors of A and C, I need to factor out the common factor among the whole thing. Okay, so on this example we have 8x squared minus 36x minus 20. Hopefully you recognize right off the bat that there is a 4 that can be factored out of the whole thing. So I get 4 times the quantity 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. So what I'm really factoring is this, 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. And remembering A and C are 2, right, times negative 5, yielding negative 10. So I need to find factors of negative 10 that create that middle term, in this case of negative 9, not the negative 36 that was up here, right? So we're going to get negative 10 and 1, right? When those add together, you get your negative 9. So again, that's the first step. Next step is to create, okay, now I have to create a negative 10 and a 1 from the factors of 2 and 5. And again, not the 8 and the 20 out here, the 2 and the negative 5 in here. So I have 2's factors are 2 and 1. And again, I want to take the factors of negative 5, and I'm going to get negative 5 and 1, and 5 and negative 1. And hopefully you recognize that 2 times negative 5, that's going to create my negative 10 that we were looking for up here. And then 1 and 1 is going to create my 1 I was looking for up here. So what does that look like? Well, that 4 comes along for the ride. We got my 2 sets of parentheses. And we said that we have to be able to multiply the 2x, and then there's 1x here, right? And the 2 gets multiplied by the negative 5, as we saw here. So that means it has to go out over here, so they're multiplied, our outer terms. And then the 1 times 1, so we get plus 1. And again, if you're not sure, go back and FOIL them back out and find out if it works. If it doesn't, you put something in the wrong place.